Hello everyone, today we are diving into the London system, one of the most solid and beginner friendly opening for white. It's easy to learn, work at all levels and give you a safe and flexible position right from the start. I'll break down the key ideas, setups and plans so you can start winning games with the London system. So let's begin. Okay, so white starts with 1d4, controlling the center. And now black generally have two ways to continue the possession, which is g5 and knight f6. First, let's try to look at the move d5, controlling the center with the pawn. Now we play the move bishop to f4, developing the bishop. And now black plays the move knight to f6, simply developing the knight. And now we play the move e3, trying to open up the light square bishop, trying to protect the pawn and the bishop. That makes sense. And now black is already having many ways to continue the position. Black can play the move simply taking out the bishop. Black can play the move c5, which is one of the main moves, and e6, first keeping the bishop block and simply developing the kingside pieces and castling up. First, trying to take the look of bishop f5, simply developing the bishop, following the basics of chess. And now we simply play the move c4. The moment your opponent also takes out the bishop, I would always recommend you guys to simply play the move c4, expanding on the queen side. And after c4, your ideas are mainly generally to play the move queen b3, trying to put pressure on the b7 pawn, as there is no bishop on the c8 square to guard the b7 pawn. So after c4, for example, if your opponent plays the move e6, now you are having these ideas, simply developing the knight to f3, getting your bishop out, maybe knight c3, or you can even go for playing the move queen b3, putting pressure on the b7 pawn, and believe me, white is having absolutely no problem. So going back, that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move bishop to f5. Now trying to take the look of c5, which is actually the main move and kind of a trendy move nowadays. So black's idea is to put pressure in the center, and also at the same time black wants to play the move queen b6, trying to attack the b2 pawn. So we simply play the move knight to f3, which is the main move, simply developing the kingside pieces. And now, first of all, you can also play the move knight c3, and this opening name is the Jobava London. And the general idea is to simply develop the knight over here, bishop over here. You can castle up, and it's a very aggressive setup, but you can explore it if you want. But I would say a more stable setup is to simply play the move knight to f3. And after knight b3, now black is having ways to continue the possession once again. Knight c6, or simply going for the move queen b6, directly attacking the b2 pawn. So first, starting with knight c6, simply developing the knight. We play the move knight to d2. There's a saying that it's better to first develop the knight at the place of putting your pawn on c3, which is the general idea in the London. So I would first like to recommend you guys to play the move knight to d2. And now black goes for playing the move queen b6. And now the idea behind knight d2 before playing the move c3 was, now you can simply capture on the pawn on c5. If black captures the pawn back, we are having absolutely no problem. We can simply continue the game with c4, rook c1, and just developing the pieces. But instead, if black goes for a much bold decision, which is to capture the pawn on b2, now we can play the move rook b1, attacking the queen, kicking the queen back, and now playing the move bishop b5, queen cross c5, simply castle up. And now our idea is already to play the move c4. For example, e6, c4, we can jump in with the knight, and you can see black's position is all doomed up. All his pieces are on the last rank, and white is completely better, practically winning, I would say. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move knight to c6. If opponent goes for the move directly queen b6, then we can simply go for playing the move knight to c3. And there is a very strong idea behind knight to c3. If black goes for capturing the pawn on b2, you can now jump in with the knight with knight to b5, with the simple idea of knight c7, attacking the king and the rook. So the only way to stop it is to play the move knight a6, simply covering the c7 square. But actually it's not really going to work because of rook b1 attacking the queen. Black queen is forced to capture the pawn. We play the move rook a1 once again, and after queen b2, you will see you can actually sacrifice the rook for the knight. And after takes, knight c7 check, and you are just getting a piece for free, and that's completely winning. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move queen to b6 or knight to c6. So now let's talk about what happens if opponent plays the move e6. First, trying to develop his pieces on the king side, trying to castle as soon as possible, and that makes sense. We are going to first start with knight f3 as usual, bishop to d6, and now I would like to suggest you guys to play the move bishop g3, simply going back with the bishop. And now, for example, if your opponent simply captures the bishop, which is one of the options, but first let's look at if your opponent simply short castles in the position. We can simply play the move bishop to d3, for example knight c6, simply c3 with the idea of just chopping knight b4, which attacks the bishop on d3. So that's why I would like to recommend you guys to first play the move c3, bishop to d7, just knight d2, queen e7. And now the most critical part in the position, after queen e7 you will notice that your opponent wants to play the move e5. For example, if we play the move a3, just e5, we can capture everything over here, and you will notice black is having an absolutely fine position. So the moment your opponent tries to get the move e5 move in, you should always try to stop it. How? Just put your knight on e5. That's it. Just put your knight on e5. Never allow your opponent to play the move e5, because then it equalizes the position on the spot. So I would like to recommend you guys to play the move knight to e5, just stopping e5. And what is the idea? For example, if your opponent plays something random like a6, we are simply going to castle up. And now our idea is basically to focus attack on the king side. How? We can play the move f4, just cement our knight on e5 with the idea of bishop h4, pinning up this guy. We can get our rook in, like just doing a rook lift, getting the queen in, and believe me, that's a horrible attack coming to the black king, and that's over. For example, if your opponent simply captures the knight with the bishop, takes, and he simply drops back with the knight. We are already having many ways to continue the possession. Here are some of the ways. You can play the move queen h5, threatening a mate. You can play the move f4 f5. You can even play the move e4 after it takes knight cross e4. You are having more space in the center. Your pieces are just flying in. Just queen g4, knight f6, and believe me, that's it. White is already winning. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent castles up. If your opponent goes for capturing the bishop on g3, just capture it back with the pawn. And after short castles, now I would like to recommend you guys to launch a deadly attack on the king side. How? Develop your knight on c3. Why? Because we want to castle long side in the future. For example, knight d7, just centralize your knight on e5. For example, if your opponent plays something random like c6, bishop d3, just getting the pieces in. And for example, if g6, just g4. And now you are having the idea of playing g5, attacking this knight. You can get the king, queen in, you can castle up long, and there is some deadly attack on the king. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays c6. If your opponent goes for capturing the knight in the center, we can simply capture it back, the knight goes back, and now f4. With the same idea, getting the bishop, getting the queen, castling up long, and believe me, black is just over. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move d5. So now talking about what if your opponent simply continues with knight to f6 at the place of d5. We are first going to develop the knight. Now your opponent is actually having two ways to continue the position. He can go for the move c5, or he can go for the move g6. d5 just transposes. So first, talking about the move c5, attacking the pawn on d4, we simply push it up the pawn. And after d5, your opponent can go for playing the move like, for example, if d6, just playing a solid chess. You can play the move knight to c3. And now your idea is to just play the move queen e2, push up pawn in the center. You are having a nice center. You are having more space on the queen side. Your pieces are well centralized. You can already launch some fiery attacks on the king side once black castles up short. You can castle up long, and believe me, white is absolutely fine, and you are the one who's going to attack. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move d6. Coming to the main move, which is queen b6. At the first glance, it looks like we are just hanging a pawn on b2. But now we are simply going to develop our knight to c3, giving up the b2 pawn. But now bishop to d2. Believe me, it's a gambit. It's a poison pawn on b2, because after bishop d2, it defends the knight. Not only defends the knight, but now our idea is kind of unstoppable with the idea of e4 f4, grabbing more space in the center with the idea of knight f3, just taking out the bishop, just roll down your pawns in the center. And black is lacking the development. So that's why black is simply going to lose the game. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays the move c5. Now discussing the move, which is if your opponent plays the move g6, which is also known as the king's Indian defense. We are first going to develop the knight on c3 this time. Only this time. Why? Because I'm having a very strong idea. For example, if your opponent plays the move d5, trying to control the center. Now we can first play the move e3, for example bishop g7, and now h4. h4 is a move which is a very strong move in this position. Why? For example, if your opponent simply castles, we can play the move h5. knight cross h5, and it looks like we just gave up a pawn for free, but now we can sacrifice the rook for the knight, takes queen h5, and believe me, we are exchanged down, but we are launching some heavy attack, and according to the engine, this position is just completely winning for white. That's exactly how you can play with the white pieces, the London system. If your opponent plays the move h5, trying to stop your own idea with h5, now you can play the move knight to f3. What is your idea? Your idea is to simply play the move bishop d3, centralize the knight on e5, putting pressure on the pawn on f7 and g6. You can develop your queen maybe on f3, and you can just castle up long, and you can even launch some crazy attacks with g4 or maybe f3 g4. And believe me, black is once again in danger. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays d5. If your opponent plays as usual like bishop g7, simply playing the opening of King's Indian defense, we can play the move e4, and now actually we do not have the King's Indian, but we have the Perk. Generally in the Perk we are having a complete control of the center, and now our idea is just as shown in the position. We want to castle up long. For example, if black castles up short, we can play the move f3 with the idea of g4, h4, h5, launching a deadly attack on the king side. We can simply castle up on the queen side, and believe me, black's just over. So that's it. That's how you can play the London system opening. So I believe now you are kind of well prepared against how to play the London system, and you have got a basic idea about this particular opening. If you want to master this opening, the best advice from my side would be to watch the games of top players. There are many top players who plays the London system, including Magnus Carlsen. You can watch his games and you can master the London system. So yeah, that's it for this video. I hope that you guys had fun and you guys must have learned something. If you did, make sure to like, share and subscribe. I'm going to come up with these more interesting videos like this. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching One Shot Chess. Bye bye.